Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Ryan, for 5 years, the seat has been taken by you, my very good best friend. Should I say best friend? My best
Don't
friend.
lie. I was going to say you look 5 years older, but maybe that...
Well, I've had 2 children. I don't know what your excuse is. Well, Ryan, this is a big episode for a lot of reasons. One particular reason, which folks are going to know from the title of the episode, it's 5 years since we started the podcast.
5 years. It's been an eventful 5 years. I think if we had tried to sort of pick what was going to happen, predict what was going to happen over the next 5 years, we would have gotten that pretty wrong.
I mean, I was sure you'd be dead by now because of all the drinking, psoriasis, liver failure. I was sure of it.
I want you to know, when I go to my doctor, I make her check every liver number there is, and she has nothing to say to me. So
that's good. That's good. Well, Ryan, I agree. It was a very strange 5 years. Listen, we kept it going through COVID. And we've both traveled extensively during those 5 years, which has been wonderful. We've seen great changes. I just want to say I'm so thrilled that you stuck with it. I think that's the thing I'm happiest about is we've managed to do this project together. We love each other. This has been an amazing project to keep working on. So I want to say thank you to you for being my partner in crime on Out of Office.
Well, thank you, Kiernan. It has been largely a pleasure to spend this time with you. I had to sit through the Boston trilogy and the Peru. What is it called? Wait 9 episodes.
Wait until the book comes out, Ryan.
I know.
We're going to do you're going to interview me about Boston. This is all secret Boston treasures that didn't even make it into the trilogy.
We're going to go deep. No, I'm excited about the book. Do you have a pub date yet? Is that how the kids say it?
No, I don't have a publication date yet, but we're well into editing it. I think, I don't know this for sure, but I think that travel books tend to be a little speedier to get on the shelves because, of course, the information's fairly timely.
Yes, so it'll move a little faster because
it'll move a little faster. I've got the first mock-up of the cover of the book, so it's starting to become very real.
The information is timely as if Boston's changed in 180 years. The last thing that changed is John Adams moved something, and that was about it.
Of course, Ryan. Now that we're talking about travel guidebooks, this is a big episode, not just because it's our 5 years.
Is there did you officially get that restraining order from Rick Steves?
I got quite the opposite of a restraining order from Rick Steves, though he did call me a stalker. He called me a travel stalker, which I thought was very generous. Right.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Today on the episode for the 5-year anniversary, and this just the planning, it just worked. The good fortune worked. This is like when Tom Cruise went on the Rosie O'Donnell show. That's for all you millennials out there.
And he jumped on the couch.
Yeah. And when Oprah came on Letterman, today it marks the end of an era. The era of the quest for Rick Steves, our 5-year sojourn to get the great Rick Steves, the travel luminary, the luminous being, the inspiration for me getting out into the world, the man who introduced me first to England, then to France, then on to Rome, then to Poland and Croatia and Slovenia. I feel like I've traveled the world with him, and Ryan, he finally came on the show, and it's not a joke. I feel like people are going to see it. They're going to think it's a joke. He was generous enough at episode 100 to send us an audio message, but this is so much more than just a one-way audio message, Ryan. This is I think we got about 35 minutes he spent with us coming together to discuss everything he's built, how he approaches travel, how travel has changed over time. It's astounding.
It is incredibly exciting and really unbelievable because when we started the quest for Rick Steves, we had 20 listeners a month, being generous, I think. We we had no idea that we'd actually be able to one day get Rick Steves on the pod. We had on the 100th episode, it was like so close, but it was like eating outside of that restaurant you've been really excited about.
Yeah.
And then to actually have him come on the pod, this episode, our 5-year anniversary, it's really special, and I'm so excited to have him on. And you were smiling from ear to ear during that interview, Kiernan. I've never seen you look like that before. It's like a howdy doody.
I was embarrassed. We recorded the video just for the records, and I couldn't watch it. I felt so stupid. But I'm just so thrilled, and I want to say thank you so much to the Rick Steves staff and to Rick himself for coming onto the show. I mean, we're a sizable podcast, and sticking to it for 5 years, we've grown, and Apple's been very generous in featuring us. But Rick has TV shows and podcasts and books to write and a big staff, and he travels extensively for all of that. So his time is really his most precious commodity. And so for him to give us 30 to pepper him with questions and to really fulfill this quest, it's one of the highlights of my life. I can honestly say it's one of the highlights of my life. So thank you to Rick and to his staff.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rick. And, I think we shouldn't spend too much time up front, because there has been 161 episodes of anticipation to get to where we are. But there's just a couple things.
I just feel the need to just jump in and again say to folks, this isn't fake. We didn't hire like a Rick Steves impersonator.
Yeah. This is not AI voice. This is not AI voice.
I know some of the listeners are going to think it's AI.
I mean, I've been AI voice for years, but this is real.
And while Ryan didn't participate in the interview, he jumped in just long enough to take a screenshot to prove that the Zoom was real. So we will have to post that on social media in celebration of this historic achievement.
Yes, this is incredibly exciting, and it's a great interview. I don't usually say that to you, Kiernan, but this one I mean it.
Well, before we get to the interview itself, Ryan, I just got to say, is there anything you want for 5 years? It's kind of like an anniversary, or a birthday of the podcast. Is there anything? I'm not saying we deserve anything particularly, but maybe just a little something we could ask our listeners.
I think that if you are listening to this pod and you haven't left us a 5-star review with how much you love the show, this is the moment. This is the moment to do it. We got Sunshine Blaze just gave us a 5-star shout out and said that you and I are fun and engaging. I think that's mostly true, but come give us your 5-star reviews.
I agree with exactly half of that comment.
Someone called us educated, which I think is also quite funny. True for one of us. Don't make them guess, Kiernan. Okay.
A 5-star review would help the pod. It helps us get information back, because when you leave the comments, we listen to them, and suggestions you have for a show. And, we just really appreciate it, and it helps us get more listenership with it, which motivates us and makes it worth it. And I think for the 5 years ahead, because we certainly plan on keep going, this will just be more fuel in the tank.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to, the 10-year, we got to figure out who the next quest is.
Well, Rick, you'll hear Rick teases about coming back.
Right.
So who knows? The quest for Rick Steves might go on, and I promise if we do continue, because we're going to keep the segment going, because we love to talk about and review everything that's going on at Rick Steves Europe, all the new content, new books, new PBS programs. So we'll certainly keep the thing going, and I do think by dint of him coming on the show, it is time for us to launch a theme song for it. So we'll work on that in episodes forthcoming.
I think that sounds great. I think we have quite a few women who listen to this pod, believe it or not. And I think they would appreciate it if we could get Stanley Tucci on the pod. So that's going to be my own little personal,
You want to start a quest for Stanley Tucci?
Well, I don't think it's a quest. I think it's more of like a emailing his agent and being like,
Trust me, that is not how it works. I can tell you from 5 years of begging PR@ricksteves.com, it takes a lot more than that.
Well, I feel like Stanley Tucci's got a lot more free time than Rick Steves. Like he's pretty chill. So
Eugene Levy has a show now. He's got a travel show now. Maybe we could get him.
Yeah. Well, you go for that, and I'm going to go for Mr. Tucci, because he's he's one of my guys.
I'm saying I would take Rick Steves over any of these people any day. With that, it's bringing it together, Ryan. We have a quest for Rick Steves. and a takeoff. I think it's time to get going.
Tell the cabin crew we're going to Europe.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
Well, the end of a quest. My guest today is the travel luminary who opened my eyes to the world outside of the US and held my hand on those first nervous steps. Not literally, I'm sad to say, but figuratively, as you can see from my stack of books right here. For over 2 decades, he has hosted his PBS travel show and lots of great specials besides, including recently the stellar Art of Europe, which we've reviewed on the show. His company takes about 30,000 travelers on tours to Europe each year, and his books line the travel sections of every bookstore in America with their peppy blue and yellow covers. And yes, he has a podcast. It's time to welcome the founder of Rick Steves Europe, Mr. Rick Steves. Rick, thank you so much for coming on Out of Office. It's great to see and hear you.
Well, thank you, Kiernan. It's nice to be with you. And I understand you're kind of a travel stalker who's been waiting for me to show up. And all you got to do is knock on the door, man. We're both travelers.
I'm surprised we haven't run into each other. Ryan has used the S word before. I say a fan, I say a Ricknick, but I would never dare venture close without permission and welcome.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be with you.
But I am a great fan of your work, and I want to start by saying thank you so much for devoting your life for this. I think the business that you've built, the approach that you take to travel is what Ryan and I try to emulate and we encourage. And I think that you have been the gateway for so many people. It means a great deal for you to come on and speak to us.
Great. Well, we're kindred spirits, and I think we both believe in the value of travel. And I'm having a tough time slowing down. I just love my work so much. I just kind of can't get over it. I'm still just in a sort of a state of euphoria after having spent 2 weeks in Poland and a week in Istanbul this month. And it's just, isn't it nice to find your niche?
Yes. So I should ask, where are you right now? I suspect it's your home, given that you just referenced some recent travels.
Oh, yeah, I'm home. I'm sitting right where I've in this little community north of Seattle ever since I was a kid. I literally look out my window now and see my old junior high school. So I haven't ventured very far, but it's kind of nice to have a place that you really feel rooted in as a springboard. And it makes traveling, I think, even more fun.
It does make your commute to Europe much longer than it has to be. The East Coast, I'm in Boston. This is a great
Yeah, I know. Well, I limit, I don't like to go to a bunch of little trips. This year, for various reasons, I ended up with, I think, 4 little trips instead of 2 big ones, just because jet lag blows a couple of days out of your life, But we got nice. I just flew nonstop from Istanbul to Seattle. I didn't even realize there was a nonstop 12-hour flight from Istanbul right to Seattle. It was a delight.
And when you were recently on the road, what are you doing? Are you going back to the guidebooks to correct them? Or are you just trying to find more sites to include?
Yeah, it's that's an interesting question, because a big priority for me is how to prioritize my time. And I've been spending basically 100 days a year in Europe ever since I was a student. And I've built my business over the last 40 or so years, and I employ 100 people now. And as you said, we take 30,000 people to Europe on our tours. We got about 50 guidebooks. And I've got to decide what's the best use of my time. I love to guide groups around, but my guides do a better job than I do as far as their areas of specialty. I'm a kind of a generalist. So I don't really guide the tours anymore, but it's a big part of our program. So I spend a lot of time working on the tours as I'm in Europe. But my primary thing is producing content, and that would be updating and writing guidebooks and making TV shows. And that's what I do. So I'm over there. Probably a third of my time is dedicated to making TV, a third of the time researching and updating and writing guidebooks, and a third of my time working on the tour program. And what I did just in this last trip, for example, I met the crew in Poland, and it takes 6 days, Kiernan, to produce one of our 30-minute programs on public television.
Wow.
So 2 shows, 12 days in Poland. And then I flew to Istanbul, and it's just like having a huge garden, and you just got to go out there and garden in it, fixing all these guidebooks up for making sure they're up to date and accurate for people and well designed. So we've covered all of Europe. And I've had an Istanbul book out now for 8 editions that I just love. And I wanted to dedicate some serious time to Istanbul. And I just was lost in Istanbul in the most beautiful way for a week, and came home with lots of good material, and then massage that into the chapters and get it to my editors. And as soon as possible, it's out on the bookshelves, so people have the latest on that particular book. So my favorite thing, I would say, is being alone in Europe with a good local guide. When I'm researching a guidebook, nobody's with me. I don't want my friends or my partner or anything like that. Get out of my way. I'm not very polite right now. I've got a job to do. All I want to do is, get a good night's sleep and meet my guide in the morning and go to town.
And you've been expanding the type of books you've been writing on over the last few years. You've gotten into the political realm. You focused more on food with a co-author. And on the TV, you've been expanding into art. Art's always been a part of your tours, but with a supreme focus. So I'm curious, what else are you working on outside of the guidebooks?
Well, if the political book and so on, if there's something that is something I can contribute to as a travel writer, as a teacher, as a tour guide, a person with a platform, with a radio show and a TV series and so on, I jump at that opportunity. And, if you look at the specials that I've produced over the years for public television, I mean, we've done 100 shows that just cut Europe into half-hour slices. And, okay, this is Copenhagen, and this is Tallinn, and this is North Ireland. But the real fun challenges and the shows that are really close to my heart are the political ones or the special ones. We did a show on fascism. Well, that's a very timely thing if you care about American democracy. Look at what happened in Europe in the 1920s and 30s. Learn from that. The Holy Land is a very confusing place for a lot of people. So I wanted to do a show that explained to Americans. I try to find areas where Americans are curious, but steep on the learning curve. We don't know a lot about it. A lot of people just don't get the complexity of the Holy Land in Palestine. And there's an added dimension to that where it's hard for the media to cover that area with an honest dual narrative approach. If there's a wall, there's 2 stories. Let's honestly hear both stories. And that's tough in the United States. So I wanted to help that out. So we did a special on the Holy Land. Iran did a special on Iran, which was really exciting because Americans really, all we knew about Iran was the hostage crisis and Ted Koppel. And it's kind of a media circus we need to understand that country better. Hunger and Hope, Lessons Learned in Ethiopia and Guatemala. I've long thought that there's some structural poverty, and as travelers, we can be tuned into that. And I used Guatemala and Ethiopia for classrooms for better understanding why there is hunger. And that's something I wanted to share with the American public. So those are, the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. People don't really appreciate, whether they go to church or not, the importance of the Reformation 500 years ago in the story of Europe. So that 500th anniversary only comes along every once in 500 years. I thought I better have a show out for 2017. So we had that 1-hour special on the Reformation. These are all just personal interests of mine that I think are worth other people knowing about. A lot of smart people, steep on the learning curve. Let's craft a 1-hour script, go over and shoot it and bring it home. It's really fun, as you can imagine, to be able to do those. And they're not all heavy. One of the shows was just the great festivals in Europe. And over the years, we had a chance to go to the Running of the Bulls and to go to the Palio and to go to Oktoberfest and go to, the spring, the Semana Santa and Palm Sunday in Sevilla and all that. Let's bring that home. How does Europe celebrate Christmas? How does Europe celebrate Easter? How does Europe party? These are all fun shows. And coming out of those, I learn a lot. So I write either a new chapter to my Travel as a Political Act book or a book altogether on that topic.
You mentioned zeroing in on topics that people are curious about, maybe they don't know a lot about. I think trying to tap into that curiosity and giving people the little push they might need is a big part of your appeal. So for those, who don't know you and don't know your approach to travel, what's the pitch that you give to people who are travel skeptical? How do you persuade people there's a lot of value in getting out of America?
You learn so much about your home by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. I think it's just a beautiful thing. A lot of people are afraid of culture shock. And for me, culture shock's a beautiful thing. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective, and culture shock needs to be curated. So what I do as a tour guide and a travel writer and a TV host and so on is hopefully to curate culture shock. I love to get people out of their comfort zones, but you don't just throw them into this stressful, cultural experience. You hold their hand and you make it, you give them context and you make it not scary. So if I can introduce Americans to a whirling dervish, that's a real cool thing.
And why is the focus always been Europe? It sounds like that was your first stepping stone. Do you see it as a stepping stone of the world, an end in itself?
Yeah, I see Europe as the wading pool for world exploration, and I'm a teacher. I'm working. I've got a mission. I'm not on vacation. If I was on vacation, I'd go to Nepal. I'd go to Sri Lanka. I'd go to Indonesia. Those are places I know and love and haven't been to for a long time. Or I'd go to places I don't know yet. But I've got this be careful what you wish for or pray for, because you might get it. I wanted to be a hit for American travelers in Europe. And now my books are the best-selling guidebooks in each country. And I've got a TV show that's really well established and got a radio show that airs on 500 stations. And it's just a dream come true for a tour guide. It's the ultimate tour guiding gig. And I want to stay focused on what I do well. And I want to have a big impact. And I'm not interested in helping people travel through Burma as much as I am helping travel beyond America. I joke with my staff that our mission is to inspire and equip Americans to venture beyond Orlando. And it's so true. My market are people who have been to Disney World 5 times and they're just going to get a passport and they realize, there's a big world out there. Nothing wrong with Disney World, but after 4 or 5 trips, consider Portugal. It's not going to bite you. I love to talk with older people who have never been out of the United States and they're heading off to Europe for their first time. That is a mind-blowing experience for somebody well into their adulthood, and I'd love to help them out. So that's my mission. Europe is the biggest market from a business point of view. And it's my heritage. It's where I've gone all my life. I've got a degree in European history. I've got friends all over Europe. I've got relatives over there. And I love it. It makes sense to me. And I've got kind of the odd bag of tricks to be the go-to guy for European travel. If that's kind of like what I like to do. And it's a huge responsibility. So I'd love to go to the South Pacific. I dream of going to the South Pacific. But if somebody was going to give me just an all expenses paid luxurious trip to Fiji right now, my first thought would be 10 days. I really need to go to Portugal and update that book if I had 10 days. So that's my, I'm not complaining about it. It's a beautiful problem to have. I just have this book that a lot of people are going to use and it could be better. So do I want to lay on a beach for a week or do I want to go back to Lisbon and make sure I've got the best restaurants to recommend? I want to have that book that people with Rick Steves on the cover, that's going to be a godsend for people who are traveling. And something else I just get great joy out of is connecting good individual travelers, thoughtful travelers, with small business people in Europe, real entrepreneurs, real mom and pop kind of for the love of art, little businesses. I just love doing that. I hate connecting travelers with aggressive, big, giant, soulless corporate money-making machines. Sometimes you got to do that. That's just fine. But if I can connect people to people through a B&B or a little restaurant or a nice, a great little tour company in Europe, I just love that. It brings me great joy. I was just in Istanbul speed dating a bunch of tour guides. I had one extra day, and I booked 6 different guides at 90-minute intervals all day long. And I had each guide with me for 90 minutes. And they knew they were just in a bunch of, in a list of guides. And I went around and I did my updating with them. I was using them to help me update the book, but I was learning how they were, how they taught, how they related to Americans, and so on. And I told them up front, I'm working with 6 guides today. I'm hoping to get 2 or 3 that I can add to my guidebook and recommend, because that's a big deal to recommend a guide in a guidebook.
Yeah.
It provides a third of their total employment if they get in a good guidebook. And what I like to do is not be a middleman with a commission and all that kind of stuff, but just, I always tell people the best reward you can give me is to make my readers happy, and give my readers the net price. These days, everything is 20% is added to the bill in order to cover the booking.com, cut or commission, which that's how business works. But I would really rather make money selling the book and then be the honest connector between my travelers and independent business people, where the business person will get all the money and the traveler will pay a net price without the commission built into it, and they'll save substantial money. And it's win-win-win as long as I'm happy without getting a cut of it myself.
Yes, I can attest to the sending folks to places you never would have found before. You sent my wife and I to a beekeeper in Slovenia that, you printed the phone number in the book.
Yeah.
And I called it, and it was far enough out that we spent a couple hours just trying to find the place and hook up with the guy, but we got to see so much scenery, and then it was an amazing, 2-on-1 experience. It was incredible.
That's a beautiful example of what I like to do.
Yeah. And,
it's kind of odd to meet this little beekeeper in Slovenia, and then, he doesn't know if I'm for real or whatever, but I'm taking notes. Yeah. And then the next year, all of a sudden, he sees this steady stream of adventurous American travelers with my guidebook in their hands. And it's great. I've got a friend, an old pickled guy he runs a scrumpy orchard, a hard apple cider orchard in England.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Roy Wilkins, I think is his name. And he's always been an old codger in my mind, and he doesn't seem to age. And I've been sending people to this obscure little orchard, apple orchard, for years and years. And it is an amazing experience. And anybody who ventures out there, it's just a paragraph in my book, but those are the little nuggets. And what I love to do as a travel writer is just to think, that tip alone will make the person who buy this book happy they bought the book, you see.
Well, and I like their stepping stones to each other. After we went to that beekeeper, we went to the beekeeping museum to learn about the full culture around beekeeping.
There you go.
Yeah, which is an episode I've been meaning to get to on Out of Office. Soon,
I've got one of those painted beehive doors in my office on the wall because
that's
wonderful.
Great.
It's wonderful folk art.
Oh yeah, fantastic souvenir. It hits what are the Out of Office 3 Ps of souvenir. It's a good price, it's portable, and it's potent. It brings back the memory of where you were.
Ooh, I like that.
You can have it. You can have
3 Ps of souvenirs. I totally agree with you. And that's the kind of souvenir I like.
One other thing I always love about your books is it's very realistic about how real people travel. So if you're going to go to the British Museum, you give a step-by-step guide of here's if you have an hour and a half and you need to do the big stuff. And if you have the whole day, you can get through, but encourage you to explore beyond these recommendations. What is your read on why more guidebooks don't take that approach? I just think it's so in touch with how the time pressures and the money pressures of what real people have when they're overseas.
I think my advantage is I've been a tour guide for 30 years, and I know how confused a tourist can be. I know what their attention span is. I know what their intellectual context is. I know how many Madonnas and children a mortal tourist can still be interested in seeing.
Right. Yeah,
before they kind of go, I've seen enough Madonnas and children. I know how many hill towns somebody wants to climb to. I know how many thatched cottages are cute until, I've seen a thatched cottage. Because for years I brought groups around and I can look at thatched cottages and climb hill towns and see Madonnas and children until the cows come home and find it interesting. But I know that I'm a little unusual that way. So I have that tour guide sensibility of how confused are people and what's interesting to them, what's overwhelming, what's their attention span. And then also when people find themselves writing travel, there's something about it where they think they're advertising copywriters, and everything sounds like a glossy ad for a cruise, a river cruise or something like that, And I just want to turn down the volume. I'm the consumer's advocate. I'm not a shill for any industry. I don't, if this little B&B is charming, but it's above a sex shop, I'm going to say it's above a sex shop.
Right, yeah.
I visit them and they say, well, do you have to say it's above a sex shop? And I go, well, yeah, because that's a concern for some people, and it is what it is. They treat me like I'm writing a paid ad, but I'm not. I'm just reporting for the people who invest in my book. So I just try to tell it straight. And a lot of my partners, my colleagues that I work with, I have to coach them not to fill it with rave reviews. It's, everything, it's all kind of a business. You got to pay this much to get there, or it takes this much time to find that beehive. The guy with the beehives in Slovenia, you invested some time to get there. I got to just make sure you have some context so you can appreciate it and try to describe how to get there so you minimize the headaches in getting there. But it's all just kind of a straight equation, and our job is to design it so it helps people out. And also, people need to make decisions. I mean, part of my job is to cut through the superlatives. I know you can spend a lifetime in Florence, but I got 1.5 days. Now, how am I going to use them? I'm an American. I have the shortest vacations in the rich world. Yeah. So I'll just tell it really straight. If you've seen this, you don't need to see that. Another example I like to use is Oxford and Cambridge. They're both great towns, university towns, but they're redundant. You don't need to do both. Do one or the other and save up time for something entirely different.
And you've had a focus recently on celebrating the second cities of Europe. So how do you define a second city? Mm-hmm. And I'm also curious more broadly about when someone's undertaking trip planning, what's your personal approach when you have your own vacation, when you're not traveling for the book? How much do you super structure your time? How much do you open yourself up to just happenstance and fortune?
I love trip planning. Just last night, my girlfriend's going to Madrid for 5 days with her daughter. And I've got all sorts of things I need to do, but I jumped on this opportunity to help her plan her trip and line up things. And, how are you going to spend your time? What are you going to make reservations for in advance and so on? My neighbors just took our 3-week tour. They signed up on our big, giant Best of Europe tour, the 3-week tour that is our flagship tour. And I just love to sit down with them and say, okay, you're landing a couple days early, you're staying a couple days later, you're going to have some free time on this day. How are you going to use these opportunities? It's a fun challenge. And I've always thought that you can really, really bump up the value of your trip if you just find a way to design the itinerary smartly and use your time smartly. I mean, so many people come into this one town on one day when the museums are all closed. I mean, Monday, and all the museums in this town are closed. And you spent that day going up there when you could have spent the next day going up there. It was just sloppy. It's just lazy, and you're paying a big price for it. Do you really want to do the hop on, hop off bus on a business day when there's lots of traffic? Or wouldn't it be better to do it late on a Sunday when there's no traffic? These are just practical little insights, and that's fun for me to work on. In the old days, I traveled totally footloose and fancy free, no reservations. But that was a long time ago. And now I have to say, I get every night nailed down I reserve a hotel for every night or wherever I'm going to sleep. And then I let the days be flexible. But a big thing post-COVID in our guidebooks is this new need to recognize museums have found the beauty of regulating their crowds by making people have a reserved ticket in advance, So I'm disinclined to go online and make a reservation for the Prado or the Rijksmuseum or the Uffizi Gallery. But I just remind myself, nope, this is the new way you got to do it. So go online, make that reservation, commit yourself to 10 o'clock on that day, and you will avoid a lot of frustration. If you go to Rome, hoping to see the Colosseum and hoping to see the Vatican Museum, and you don't have a reservation, you're not going to see either of those things. It's going to be very frustrating. And so what I like to do now, it's almost like I need a little sidebar on the first page of every chapter. Going to Amsterdam, what do you need to book in advance? And conversely, what do you not need to book in advance? So, because it's just, you got to decide. You got to be prepared. If you're going to Amsterdam in the typical tourist, You want to book, if you want to see Anne Frank, you got to book it. If you want to see Van Gogh, you got to book it. If you want to see Rembrandt, the Night Watch and the Rijksmuseum, you got to book it. If you want to go to a trendy, popular restaurant, you got to book it. Those are the 4 things you got to book. Everything else is wide open. You don't need to book everything else. You can walk right in. But if you want to see Van Gogh, as soon as you know what day you're going to be there, vincentvanGogh.com. I don't know, find it and then go through the prompts and pay the money. And now you've got your ticket. It's really exciting to be able to just be well organized in that regard, because it lets you be less organized otherwise. The city's your playground because you've got the main things covered.
And what when you talk about second cities, how do you define those?
Well, in my context, Seattle and Tacoma. I mean, where would you rather go? I mean, where did Kurt Cobain live? Where's the Space Needle? Where's the Chihuly Glass Museum? Where's Pike Place Market? It's all in Seattle. What's in Tacoma? Rusty piers and who knows what. But Tacoma has a surprising amount of energy, and it's got no crowds, and it would love to see you. It's the same thing in Europe. We all go to Edinburgh. What about Glasgow? We all go to Lisbon. What about Porto? We all go to Paris. What about Lyon or Marseille? These are what I call second cities. And yes, go to Edinburgh. But if you've got 4 days in Edinburgh, the most exciting thing you can do on day number 4 is to leave it and take the 45-minute train over to Glasgow, which, in a lot of ways is just as important as Edinburgh. They say in Scotland, people say a funeral in Glasgow is more fun than a wedding in Edinburgh, which says a lot to me. So these are these Rust Belt cities that have sort of a crusty working class vibe, a lot of street art, a lot of street food, a lot of edgy little restaurants and galleries. They're scrappy, and they don't have any tourists. And these days, that's an issue because, as I'm sure you've noticed in your work, Americans just all want to go to the same places. It's crowdsourcing. Everybody's going here, so that's why I'm going here. Why is everybody standing here and taking that photograph? It's an Instagram thing. There's this mania for doing what everybody else is doing. And it's driven not by expertise. It's driven by people who have never been there before that says this chocolate pudding is to die for.
Right.
Well, how do you know that's the best chocolate pudding in town, and it gets on TripAdvisor, and then they bribe people to make their comments, and pretty soon they've created a whole storm of enthusiasm for this place over something else. And I just find that in the old days, there was not enough information, and now there's too much information. And part of my job is to curate that information as well as design new content, but to curate the existing content. And with AI, it's going to get even worse.
Yeah.
So as consumers of information, there's going to be 2 kinds of consumers, sophisticated consumers and less sophisticated consumers. And some are going to be hoodwinked and some are going to have more genuine, efficient time and experiences.
Yeah, the New York Times had that scary article a couple months ago about all the AI-generated travel books that just put fear in my heart.
Did you hear about the guy? What is his name? Mike Steves. He lives in Edmonds. No. There's actually a guy, and he lives in my town. He's got my name, and he writes Great Guides to Europe. And it's all just my stuff pirated and put in his voice. And
that's a nightmare.
Yeah, it's, I think it's kind of pathetic, but we have to be smarter at knowing. It's the same thing as news. Is this really news or is it not news? And it's surprising how unsophisticated a lot of people are on that. Because if you look at this AI-generated travel information, it's got no edge. It's got no soul. It's got no spirit. It's fabricated. It's like AstroTurf compared to real grass. Well,
with only a couple of minutes left, I feel the need to ask you some specific curation, given that is your specialty. I want to know, we're big national park nuts on the show. We talk about national parks, and our audience loves national parks. So as somebody who's visited and recommended parks around Europe, are there any national parks there? You got me to Plitvice, by the way, that you would put on our map?
Well, for me, the greatest experience I've had in the last few years is hiking around Mount Blanc. And it's what I've found is I'm not even sure what distinguishes national parks from country to country and so on. But
very different regulations for different areas. Yeah.
But what I like is venerable long distance trails. Venerable meaning they've been there for generations. They're dotted with 19th century hotels in a lot of cases. Long distance routes generally have Sherpa services where they'll take your bags ahead. And there's tour companies that do beautiful little do-it-yourself walking tours where it's just you and your buddies or your partner, and they will book the hotel rooms and arrange for the Sherpa service. So you just carry a day bag during the day and you go from good hotel to good hotel and have a nice dinner and don't carry your bags. Mont Blanc is a 100-mile, 10-day hike around the highest mountain in Europe. I did a tour that cherry-picked the best 60 miles in 7 days. And it was, my girlfriend and I are still just raving about what a beautiful experience was. It inspired us to do hikes the next year and another long-distance hike in the near future. So I'd look into the venerable long-distance trails around England. They don't all need to be in the Alps. I mean, a friend of mine just hiked across England in the north along Hadrian's Wall. It's really great. Hey, Kiernan, you should just try to get me on your show again sometime because this is fun talking.
So you're saying that the quest can continue for the sequel. I love it because I really don't want to end the request. Well, unfortunately, we do have to wrap up. I do want to say your season 12 of Rick Steves Europe is just coming on to air on PBS stations all across the country. And from what I understand, it's going to feature a lot of the art of Europe information.
Oh, yeah. I'm so excited about this. Thank you for bringing that up. But that's been a huge project for us all through COVID, is collecting all of my favorite tour guiding angles on appreciating the story of European art and writing a 90-page script that's 6 hours broken into 12 episodes that tells you the whole sweep of things from the earliest prehistoric cave paintings right up to contemporary art and street art and so on. So that's out and you'll see it in your public television stations. Everything I've ever produced on TV is available on our website for free at ricksteves.com. We have a party every Monday night that we've been doing ever since COVID started. And I love our Monday night travel is free and it's just a lot of fun. I think your audience might enjoy that. And together, we're just encouraging people. I know you guys are also to just be well organized, be bold, get out there and celebrate this world by getting to know the neighbors and traveling. It's a beautiful thing and it's more important than ever.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for taking the time to come on out of office. And now it's time for the last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan. Well, we're here in the last stop. I mean, I am sweating. I'm smiling. I'm lighting a cigarette.
Yeah, is that a banana in your pocket, or do you just interview Rick Steves?
It's a microphone. It's a microphone. A road podcaster. Well, Ryan, I mean, what is there to say? What is there to say?
It's a great interview. I really enjoyed it, and gosh, one of the things that he said about having a home base so the traveling is more special really struck me. When he was talking about that, in fact, he can see his junior high from the window. Yeah. So that's really cool to really travel the world and to still sort of be that grounded. He's an impressive dude.
It's funny because I didn't say, you're still in Edmonds, Washington, but I did know the name of his hometown. But once he called me a travel stalker in the first sentence, I didn't feel that I could be like, Edmonds. Yeah, Edmonds.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you didn't drop his street address, Kiernan.
No, I mean, the thing that struck me the most was I was so interested to know, I think so many companies, it's just expand. And it's been killing me wondering why he never went beyond Europe. And I thought his thinking on that, it really just showed, he decided to concentrate on a very specific American audience and to solve a problem that was ongoing, trying to inspire people to travel, give people the bravery to travel. I thought his part about Orlando, God, that spoke to me so much because I grew up I've talked about it on the pod a lot, a family where our travel was every 4 or 5 years. We'd load up, we'd take a road trip down to Disney World. And, I just think Rick, he just really uniquely solves that problem. And he has said, I want to be the absolute best at doing that. I'm not going to stretch myself thin. That's what I'm great at. And that's what I'm going to build the company on. And I think we could very much learn from that.
I totally agree. And as somebody who has traveled in Latin America quite a bit, nowhere near as much, obviously, as Rick has traveled in Europe, it only gets richer as you experience places more and you find those second cities, as he calls them, like the, smaller cities that are outside of the major tourist areas. And I think to dedicate your life to understanding, knowing, and being the great European explainer to Americans is quite something.
Well, so with that, thank you very much to Rick. And we are here in the last stop. This is the final segment of the show, the last segment of the show. That's why it's called the last stop. It's my favorite segment. In this episode, it's not my favorite segment. The interview is my favorite segment, but typically this is my favorite segment. And it's popularly known as the People's Segment, for it is the segment where we come together as a community and we share unto ourselves. We give and we receive. we try to bring something, one thing each show, you and I, Ryan, each. It could be a memory, it could be a piece of gear, it could be a souvenir, it could be a plan for the future, it could be a plan from the past. Maybe it stuck to plan, maybe it went awry, it could be an anecdote, it could be an article that we read. But even though it could be any of these things, it must meet one criterion, and that is it must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So Ryan, I'm going to ask you, as I ask you every episode here for 5 years. We did the last stop even in the very first episode.
It was our first segment.
Wait, was it the first segment?
Well, there was only the last stop before there was recalculating.
It was the last
quest for
segment
Rick
of the first show.
Yeah, but there was no other segment in the show.
I'm sure we took off. I think we took off.
Oh, we might have taken off. We did take off.
All right. So I'm going to ask you as I've asked.
I've never heard the show. I don't know.
For 5 years. Ryan, do you have a last stop this week?
I do, Kiernan. Speaking of long-running podcast, I have listened to Josh and Chuck on the Stuff You Should Know podcast. I think since like the early 2010s, but they've been around apparently podcasting since 2008, which makes them sort of the OG podcasters. They have over 1,500 episodes, and they cover.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it's a lot.
All right, but yeah, humbles us.
I know we got a while to go. And they cover all sorts of stuff like history and movies, and it's sort of all over the place. They take Stuff You Should Know very broadly, and it's really enjoyable. And last week they had an episode on an event that I have never heard about before called the Night of the Grizzlies. And this takes place in Glacier National Park. And you've been to Glacier, right?
Oh, yes, I've been to Glacier, and I don't know about the Night of the Grizzlies, but it's a very romantic sort of title.
Did you see grizzly bears when you were at Glacier?
Gosh, did I? No, I did not.
Well, so apparently this takes place in 1967. Okay, August 12th, 1967. There are two sets of hikers.
I wasn't there in 1967.
No. Thankfully, because story's not going to go well, Kiernan. So 1967, they had a very different idea of sort of how to run a national park. And Josh and Chuck talk about how the park rangers, they want to get the grizzly bears out and about with the people. And so they kind of like leave food around intentionally. And they do all these things to sort of like make the grizzly bears sort of part of the experience. And grizzly bears are not seen as like dangerous. They because they largely are vegetarian and in general are more scared of humans than not. But park rangers sort of went out of their way to kind of make the experience exciting for folks by trying to get the grizzly bears to interact with them.
Oh, God.
In fact, they tell this story of this family who drew a grizzly bear so close they put their little baby on it so they could take a picture of the baby.
Stop.
Yeah.
I'm like cringing. I had vaguely heard of like at Yosemite, or no, in Yellowstone, there are pictures of like, they used to just put the trash cans like out. There weren't like bear cans or bear safe cans. And the bears coming to eat out of the garbage was like part of the show. So it's kind of like that.
It is exactly like that. Yes. So this is the evening that things changed. These hikers had come, two sets of hikers. They were doing independent hikes. They both knew Glacier National Park really well and had chosen to camp outside that evening, pretty close to one of the big, what do you call those in the park? You always stay at them. The
lodges?
Yeah, the lodges. Pretty close to one of the lodges. Mm-hmm. And one night, this bear was skinny and underfed, and apparently that can obviously lead to an angry bear. And this bear attacked and killed multiple people over the course of that evening.
Oh my God.
And back then they didn't have tranquilizers, guns, and they didn't have the training. They in fact, the rangers waited hours to go look for this one woman because they didn't want to make the bear even more angry. So it's a really tragic event. It's a wild story, really well told over at Stuff You Should Know. And I just couldn't believe that I had never heard this story and never really considered how much we as a society have evolved in our understanding of how we engage with wild animals. And grizzly bears are wild animals. And to have the food around to try to make them engage with tourists, it's a really bad idea, and unfortunately ended in a really bad night there in Glacier. And after that, there was a big sea change in how parks encourage folks to not engage with the grizzly bears. So,
how many people died in the end?
I think it was 2 people died in the end, and one was severely injured.
Good golly.
Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting. It actually dovetails very nicely with the Lillian Cunningham interview that we had last week for her podcast on national parks. And it's true. If you listen to, of course, we think we're taking the most sophisticated, modern way of approaching national parks and conservation and restoring landscapes and wildlife. She tells the story of buffalo being reintroduced to Glacier National Park. Exactly. And, who knows 50 years from now, 100 years from now, how they're going to look about what we did. But boy, it does give you a sense we've come a long way. And also it underlines national parks are wild places.
Yes.
And that now back then it was sort of a overly curated wildness, and meaning they were trying to actually attract the bears. But even today, you're not always safe.
Yeah, you gotta be smart. You gotta be careful. Gosh, the reaction to this, they talk about this one biologist who came out in very big publication at the time and said, we need to kill all the grizzly bears in North America. And thankfully, somebody was like, "Dude, we were in their space. They've been at Glacier National Park since before humans have been."
Meanwhile, a bear biologist was like, "Let's kill all the humans with our giant paws and teeth."
Well, thankfully, there were apparently this set of brothers who came out and were like, "No, we don't need to do anything so extreme. We need to understand that these are wild animals, and we need to treat them with the respect and the distance that they deserve." So, Kiernan, do you have a last stop?
I do have a last stop, Ryan. And in fact, it is very akin to what you were talking about, because while your story is from 1967, there was a story that just came across this past week that 2 people were killed by a grizzly bear in Canada's Banff National Park. And I don't highlight this to be dark about it or to laugh at it. It's to really underline taking safety precautions when you're traveling out in nature. That's something I mentioned to Rick Steves, that we love to talk about nature preserves, national parks, and getting out into the wilderness. And in this case, the authorities got a warning alert that there was a bear attack way out in the wilderness, and some weather grounded them, and they eventually got out to this remote location and found 2 people dead, and they located the grizzly bear. And, after this happens, they do need to euthanize the grizzly bear because it'll be a threat to other humans. And it's a very dark story. I mean, these stories do trickle out a couple times every year. The article on NPR highlighted that in July, a woman was also killed in Yellowstone, but that they never actually captured the bear in that case. So that danger remains. And, this is, I actually, we've jokingly said before, I do want to do a future episode on bear safety, bear spray. I've visited Glacier National Park and Denali National Park, where there are bears aplenty, and even where there's black bears and not grizzlies. Black bears are far less dangerous than grizzlies, but you've got to respect, and when you're out there, you feel like you want to see a bear, but you don't want to see a bear, in all honesty. It's nice to see them through binoculars far away. But it's scary to see them on the trail. Catherine and I have come upon bears. There was once that we saw a bear kind of really viciously scratching itself against a tree and shaking this whole pine tree. And my God, their noses are so good. I just said, we got to walk in exactly the opposite direction for a good long time. And they don't want most, unless they're like sick or hungry, they don't really want to have a human interaction, right? No, they don't, which is why if you ever walk with park guides, the main thing they're doing is yelling, "Hey, bear," to give bears warning. Hey, get away. You don't want to interact with us and we're coming. Yeah. And, in most instances, that's the case, but you got to be prepared if it's not.
No, this is not my official last stop, but have you seen Cocaine Bear yet?
I haven't, but I like that you're bringing it, trying to end on a light note.
It is the dumbest movie ever, but I laughed quite a bit, and Neil Patrick Harris is really funny in it, and the bear is. The bear's out of control, Kieran. It's just out of control.
Cocaine will do that. And on our future bear safety episode, which I think we'll do here in the next couple, maybe 10 episodes, we'll get to it. We'll feature a review of Cocaine Bear as well. I'll give it a watch and see if we have some safety tips.
Not giving the bear cocaine seems vital to the whole safety process.
Now, Ryan, what do you want to talk about on the next episode?
So I just took this sort of like adventurous long weekend vacation in a way that I don't usually travel. You're more of a nature guy than me.
That's true. I was surprised when I heard about this one from you.
So I was in Valle Solano, Colombia, to see some whales and to see some turtles and to hike around where the mountains meet the sea, as they call it.
And your turtle content on point. I watched it on Instagram, and folks want to, we'll be reposting some of it when the episode airs. You should go to @OOO podcast on Instagram. That's @podcast, like out of office podcast.
Yeah, you go check that out, because we're going to post a picture of Kiernan and I with Rick Steves to prove that interview was not AI.
Even though we could also make that picture with AI.
Probably.
But we didn't.
We didn't. It's real. Yes. Well, look, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this has been, for 5 years now, Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
What about like a drunk bear? You think that's more dangerous than a cocaine bear?
That's it. I'm more likely to ride a drunk bear than I am a cocaine bear.
You can get pulled over in some states for that.